Hi, this is David Wilcock, and this is part 4 of the Access Your Higher Self video series. Please do not pirate this video. This is privileged, protected content that you paid for, and it represents the best work I've ever put out in terms of how to access your higher self, which is really the most important thing we can do. So if you were to leak this video online and it gets traced back to your IP address, which we can do, you would be liable for damages to the amount of $77 per video viewing or per download if it's on a BitTorrent site. We will also be monitoring BitTorrent sites and online video sharing. If it shows up, they will be removed, and we will be pursuing liability for the people that took those videos. Furthermore, we have a copyright warning, which is please do not teach this material in the order or in the exact manner in which I'm presenting it. It's okay to refer to it vaguely. It's okay to be excited about it and tell people that you liked what you saw here, but it's not okay to begin teaching this in the sequence that it is. If I inspire you in some way and you can bring in other elements that are not shared here that you'd like to share, that's fine. But the more that it starts to go in the sequence that we're saying or using the same kind of terminology, that's when it becomes copyright infringement. So please, if there's any doubt in your mind, just send us an email and let us decide what we think about whether it's a breach in copyright or not. Now, in part 4, we're going to go into some of the most magical stuff, because this is where all of the technique that I've been giving you comes together, whether it's for remembering your dreams and analyzing them as a message from your higher self, whether it's verbal information from your higher self, and I'm actually going to give you data on lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences as well. So this is the really, really fun stuff now. I was talking about the real-world application of this guardian of the threshold, the knowledge of the fact that your life is your dream, and the characters in your life and the things that happen to you. Remember I said karma, something bad happens to you. Ow, I cut my thumb. That's part of the dream. That's symbolism. It's a symbolism of how you infringed on free will. So life ultimately is like a lucid dream. It's a whole new way of looking at things. And the more you see, as I said in part 1, that we're all sharing the same consciousness field, the more plausible this becomes, because our thoughts are not private. They're coming in from others. We attract those people to us who have the most similarity to the issues that we're facing. So the buried pain will limit our courage. The lack of self-worth makes us easy to manipulate and control. Our adversaries, the guardian of the threshold, presents us with the qualities that we ultimately need to integrate in ourselves, and we can quote the parts of that adversary that are who we are and accept those parts and reject the parts that are confused, the parts that go off the deep end, and we don't need to look at those parts. We can let those go and recognize that we're being given a mirror of ourselves, and we can make adjustments in who we are accordingly. The next thing I want to talk about here is gravity wells. Gravity wells start from a trauma, something difficult, something painful that happens to you. The trauma forms a gravity well in your timeline of life, and what that means is that as you're going along in life, there is something there that keeps weighing you down. Well, if you thought that your timeline in life only goes in a straight line, and that means that whatever's in the past stays in the past forever, that's not true. Life is intrinsically cyclical. There are planetary cycles, there are cycles in the Earth, there are cycles in the sunspots. There's all sorts of cycles that we run, and there's cycles that we create within our own psyche as well. We keep bringing back the same experiences in life to grow spiritually from over and over again. The insiders in the CIA psychic training program actually do talk about what they call the river of time. And this is paradoxical because they say that the river of time flows in the direction that you're facing in the dream landscape. That's pretty trippy, right? Because the dream landscape, we're used to thinking of everything as being the present. Well, the dream landscape is everything about who you are. So it's going to be the past, it's going to be the present, it's going to be the future. Everything that you are, everything that you will be is in the landscape. The trick is where you are in time. We do experience linear time here on Earth, but psychological time and spiritual time is how we move through the landscape, and the river of time flows in the direction that we're facing. This is part of ancient mystery school teachings. It is not something commonly available. This is an advanced exercise because psychocartography is literally sitting down, mapping out your dream landscape, drawing pictures of your dreams is what they recommend in the CIA training program, to draw the pictures and understand what different parts of the landscape represent, so that when you have another dream, you can see that you're in the same area, and that will help you to understand what those areas actually represent, so that you don't have to keep going around in circles. The gravity well is what makes you go in circles. It's a trauma from your past, from your childhood, usually could be later in life too, but it keeps pulling you back emotionally. You get drawn in again and again and again, and it pulls you back to that place. That's a cycle. That's what starts to happen. In soul terms, you are literally traveling back in time and repeating experiences from earlier in your life, and they're now reiterating in a new form. This is actually also called the wheel of karma. It's a circular representation of the path you run as you go through your dream landscape. Now you want to see it as a circle, where the top represents when you're feeling really good. You go down, 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 down. At the bottom here is when you're feeling really bad. Then the circle goes all the way back up again. So each circuit that you run represents a complete cycle through your dream landscape, through the gravity well, which is the bottom of the spiral. You go through this over and over again. It's called the wheel of karma or the wheel of fortune. You start on the top, you crash to the bottom, and then you have to build your way back up. The adversary characters in your life may change, but their meaning and purpose remains. This is the most important thing that your dreams keep trying to show you. You're going to have this theme in almost every single dream. So that's why I'm making such a point of talking about it. The more you understand what your higher self is trying to tell you, the easier it will be to analyze your dreams. In forgiveness lies the stoppage of the wheel of karma. That's a quote from the Law of One series. And what that means is that when you learn to forgive yourself and forgive the people in your life who take on the adversary role, and that can even include the so-called New World Order or Illuminati, the people out there who you think are the ones, the banker bastards that are causing all the trouble in the world. Well, they're part of this lucid dream too. They're here to mirror back to ourselves our collective shadow, so that all this darkness that we keep in our own lives that we want to hide, we want to conceal it, and we go out there and say, well, I'm a great person. It's like politicians who are out there with a smiling face, but behind that smiling face is great darkness that's being concealed. If we weren't doing this in our own lives, it wouldn't be happening in the world. And the key is forgiveness. Forgiveness is probably the single most important thing that dreams are trying to get you to go through. Because in forgiveness, the wheel of karma stops. What happens is that instead of having to start at the top when you feel really good, you have money, your life is happy, everything's great, and you got to go down, 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 down to the bottom where things really suck, then you got to climb your way back up to the top again. If you can forgive yourself for what you've done that hurt other people and that hurt yourself, and forgive other people for having hurt you, and for whatever it is that they might have done, then you stay at the top. The wheel doesn't keep spinning. Your dream landscape actually expands. The distance between the locations in your landscape will actually change, and you will be actually rewriting your life. The river of time will change, the gravity wells go away, and you heal. Once you understand the wheel of fortune, the next step is to see that it is actually not just a wheel, it is a spiral. If you look at a spiral from dead-on side angle, it's going to look like just a circle most of the time. You could have an expanding spiral, which is more like a cone, but sometimes it's going to be a straight circle. The idea is there's a circle, and the circle keeps repeating. The spiral of life is what I call this. The wheel of karma can extend into a spiral path that's corkscrewing along as it goes. Similar events will happen at each overlapping point in the spiral. That means that as you go through these cycles of life and you hit something, you're now having the same type of experience. It could be a different character, could be a different place you're living or a different job or whatever, but the experience itself repeats. The diameter of the spiral is directly related to how much healing work you've done. So as the spiral widens, it literally means that there's more things that you go through in each circuit. And that means that it takes longer for you to hit the bottom. It doesn't necessarily mean it takes longer for you to go back up, because you get kind of a spring-loaded effect as you start to claw your way out. That actually happens faster, even though we can technically describe it as a wheel. So if the spiral is not expanding from cycle to cycle, if literally as you go through each cycle in your life, it's the same experiences in new forms, then you have what's called the Law of One, true helplessness. You're repeating the same thing over and over again. As the spiral widens, you have more experiences, you're learning more about yourself each time, and ultimately through forgiveness, you want to get to the top where this doesn't have to continue. The trick is to analyze, accept, and understand your experiences, and find love and wisdom that can be found within them. This was a very important exercise in the Law of One. If you can do this exercise, you're actually clearing all the blockages to be able to access your higher self. It sounds easy, but again, it's much more complex than it sounds. When Ra was asked in the Law of One material, what are we here for on earth? What's our purpose in life? They said, the purpose is to experience all things desired. Whatever it is that you want, as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's free will, if it doesn't hurt people, just do whatever you want to do. But make sure that you're analyzing, accepting, and understanding your experiences as you go along, because that's the key to true healing. The spiral also can expand into what I call the fragment tree, and this is another useful exercise, because here you can view the spiral as if it were a tree trunk that now expands into a canopy as the spiral widens. And of course, once you get up to the canopy level, it's easy for you to ultimately be able to escape from the fragment tree. But the fragment tree is how the spiral expands, but yet there are similar traumas that happen each time, and they form what you could think of as branches as they go up. Overlapping events on each turn of the wheel become branches in the tree. So you have one here and one here and one here, and as the spiral widens, you get this straight line that you could draw through it, and each one of those is a repeating theme that happens over and over again. Every branch goes down to the root of the tree, to the trunk, for the most part. Very few of them really start later. Most of your traumas are all in childhood, and they keep reiterating. So that means that you can collapse a branch by either working on the current issue where it is right now, or dealing with the core trauma at the bottom of the branch. Ideally, what you want to do, remember that exponential exercise the Law of One gave, reflect on events in your past as how they inform the present, and seek the love in this moment, the only two exercises that create exponential increase. That's where you're working every level of the branch at the same time. So when you go through a painful event in your life, don't just focus on that one event. Think of all the other times that you felt the same way and try to analogize as many of them together. You're now getting to the branch of the tree, and you can go right down to the root, to the original time that it started, and collapse the branch. This is also known to the insider world. Another thing they teach you in CIA psychic training is called clustering. Clustering is collapsing the fragment tree by analyzing how you feel about specific things. So you pick up a spoon, find out how do you feel about the spoon. If you have no emotional charge, that's fine. But you want to go through your environment, go through everything around you, and think about how you feel about it. Keep doing that over and over and over again. And what you'll find is that there are certain things that do have an emotional charge. And as you go and probe deeper and deeper into why you feel an emotional charge over any issue, you're clustering down. You're getting down through the fragment tree. If you feel a certain way about something, then why? And what made you feel that way, etc. And what you'll eventually find is that all issues cluster down to your parents or primary caregivers. That's what they teach you in the psychic training program. And ultimately what this does is it gets you back to the point before you were born in your timeline, the point of conception, which is actually called your zero-time reference, the point where your soul touches your physical body. The moment of conception is also called the quiet point, and you have to reach that point. When you get into a perfect meditative state, you're actually dialing backwards through your timeline. You can't do that if you have gravity wells in the way. That's the guardian of the threshold. The gravity wells are what stop you from getting back to the moment of your conception, the quiet point, which of course in nonlinear time it can be the now. In linear time it was when you were born, but in meditative exercises you actually do crank it backwards through all these traumas in life. That's why you have all these memories when you try to meditate. Oh, I try to meditate, but I think of all this junk in my life. Those are the branches of the tree, and as you cluster down, collapse the branches, you remove the obstacles, you remove the guardians of the threshold. The threshold is the quiet point. It's the moment of your conception in nonlinear time terms. And when you go through that, you now can access your higher self from before the time you were born. And this is really, really critical because the parents and the caregivers ultimately relate to the Creator. When you have an issue with your parent, when you're upset by your parent, this is a big, tall person who gives you everything you need. You're utterly dependent upon that person. It's very easy in the infantile mind to associate your parent with God. So the only thing you have that's the equivalent of God when you're a child is your parent. It's only as you get older that you get the idea of some sort of benevolent intelligence that's other than your parents. But your parents become a representation of your issues with the Creator. And if you can heal your issue with the Creator, you heal what's called the original wound. And this is something that would be worth an entire video on. Healing your original wound is going back to that core trauma. healing that feeling that the Creator or God has abandoned you. That feeling of abandonment, that feeling that you have been left alone here, that feeling that you are not loved, that feeling that you are not supported, is the core of all addictive behavior, all compulsive behavior, all forms of mental illness, all forms of psychosis, all forms of shopaholic, workaholic, alcoholic, drug addict. It doesn't even matter. If you end up in prison, if you do crime, if you end up in a mental institution, or if you're trending in that direction, or if you just have minor psychological issues, all of this stuff, everything, comes back to how you feel about the Creator. Do you feel the presence of the universe? Do you feel loved? Do you feel that that infinite intelligence is with you at all times? Or do you feel that it's gone away? Your parents are gifts from your higher self. You chose them from before you were born because they symbolize the dual aspect of the Creator. This gets into the gender symbolism of your parents. The father symbolizes the masculine principle. The masculine principle is you going out there, taking action, getting things done, and projecting your power into the world. The mother symbolizes the feminine principle. The feminine principle is the part of you that nurtures, that heals, that networks, that stops by the side of the road to rest and rejuvenate. You need both of these aspects. You need the active aspect that projects your power into the world. You need the passive aspect that absorbs power from the world and networks and does all these things. Neither one of them is good or bad. Neither one of them is positive or negative. These are very misleading terms. They just represent yin and yang, two forces in the universe that must dance together. Energy that you force out into the world and energy that you pull in from the world. The mother has to manage the children. She has to multitask. She has to do all these things at the same time because one kid's running around getting in trouble over here, another kid's doing this while she's cooking dinner, while she's also watching the clothes on the washing line to make sure that nobody comes and steals them. All these things are happening at the same time. The father, the male by comparison, his job is to go out there, hide in the bushes, find the beast, throw the spear at it, kill it, and drag it back to the cave. It's very simple. The masculine principle is out there. It plans, it strategizes, it wants to make something happen, and it wants to be very linear and very focused. So these two aspects are actually symbolized by your parents. So if you have a psychological issue with your father, if your father was abusive, you want to look at what that says about your issues. So a lot of times, many people have a neglectful father, a father that didn't pay any attention to them, that wasn't there. That's one of two types of things that happens. He withdraws. His energy is gone. Typically, that will make someone unmotivated in life. It will make them tend to want to relax too much, and they have this sort of issue with going out and taking action in the world. On the other side of the coin, you may have a father who was very actively up your ass. He was on your case. He wouldn't let you go. He's constantly saying you got to achieve more, you got to do more, and that's a whole different type of abuse that's just as profound and just as upsetting. But what this tends to do in many people is it makes you over-masculine. It makes you try too much to throw your power into the world, to tell people how they should think, to control situations rather than just letting them happen. You want to do all this. Now, sometimes it makes people a workaholic. Sometimes it makes you want to just work and work and work and work, and you never want to stop. But it also can make you, just even in the social context, want to manipulate the people around you. So that can be very troublesome. The feminine, if you have a mother who withdraws, then you can have a situation where you also feel nurturance is withdrawn from you. You feel very cold inside. You don't feel comfortable with nurturance. If someone tries to nurture you, you may be suspicious of that because you haven't felt love. And so if somebody tries to love you, you're inherently worried about it because it's not something that was there for you. It's been withdrawn. If you have a mother, on the other hand, who is overly involved and overly controlling, then that can in turn make you overly involved in other people. This is oftentimes where codependency comes from. If your mother is heavily involved in your life, then you were never able to fully disengage and individuate and become your own person. You were never able to go out there and have your own sense of self. You always need an emotional backbone, an emotional reference point in someone else, and you're going to be looking for that person. So then the trick is to get away from this idea of this omniscient mother figure that's always loving, that you always are going to go back to, and be willing to look more at how you can heal yourself, how you can help yourself, and that's the key. Now again, your higher self, whether you're doing readings for yourself, whether you're doing dreams and analyzing them, This is critical information. This is what your higher self wants you to know. And dreams and readings will tell you this stuff over and over again. Again, the key here is both energies must come into perfect balance. Once they do, you have now reached much higher levels of spiritual attainment. Now I want to go more into the symbolism of dreams, and I want to talk about colors. Red in dreams symbolizes safety, sexuality, and security. So when you see anything red in a dream, you want to use that information to help you decipher what that part of the dream is saying. Orange represents the self. So you can have blockages in the orange chakra that could be either a lack of self-worth or an overconfident sense of self. Either one of these will hold you back. They represent blockages in your energy field, and you need to heal those blockages if you want to access your higher self. If you feel like you're not worthy, if you feel like you're not a very good person, that's going to actually be a blockage that stops you from being able to access your higher self. A blockage in the root chakra, the red, will come across as a problem with sexuality, which can either be that you want too much of it or that you withdraw from it. Either one of those, either too much or not enough. When we go up to yellow, yellow is the center of others. It's the center where if you have a blockage in one direction, you want to manipulate and control people, whereas in the opposite direction, you allow others to manipulate and control you, and you don't have a sense of will. Those colors, again, will show up in the dreams. The yellow color represents others, orange color represents self, red represents safety, sexuality, and security. As we go up to green, green is the heart. Green is the color of love. It's a simple color, actually, because it's love without wisdom. It's love that hasn't been informed by what could happen when you start to bring in communication, talking things through. So this chakra, while it seems that unconditional love can be the answer to everything, there actually are conditions, and those conditions include taking care of yourself. This brings us up to the light blue chakra. When this color shows up in your dreams, it corresponds to light, which is the opposite pole of love in terms of universal energy, the yin and yang. Light representing more of the masculine principle, love representing more of the feminine principle. It represents wisdom, going in and gathering wisdom, gathering information. It represents communication, the ability to speak your mind. This is the throat chakra. So how well you communicate with others, how well you project your thoughts and your ideas and your wisdom out in the world is very important in this chakra. Next, we have the dark blue chakra, or indigo, which represents love light, unity consciousness, and the law of one. In this level, self and other are seen as one. This is the color of the pineal gland. It's the color of the intuition. It's something that's a great sign when you see the dark blue color show up in your dreams. And then if you actually see the violet color, this is even better. This is 7th density in the Law of One series, representing foreverness and timelessness. You go into a state where you're non-local now. You're outside of linear time. You actually perceive not that self and other are one, but that there is no self. There is only infinity, only eternity. You're not bound in time. You're not bound to a particular space. You're actually moving into foreverness and timelessness. And this eventually takes you into the white chakra, which is the completion of your entire spiritual curriculum in the universe, where you now move into what's called intelligent infinity. This is where you are now aware of intelligent infinity, which according to the Law of One is a mystery that we cannot plumb. So there's something about that center that we can never fully access. The white color typically will mean that it's something you're progressing towards, but it's very rare that people go completely into a white color in a dream for this same reason. Height and location are very important for analyzing dreams. Ground level in a dream does represent the 3rd chakra, typically speaking. What that also means is that if you go into a basement or you go down a stairwell, you're moving into lower chakras. So many dreams will involve going down a flight of stairs, going into a subterranean area. It may be scary, it may be dark. That's usually part of what this is. There could be a lot of cobwebs, it could be freaky. And that's going into the blockages, and the darkness and the scariness of it represents the blockages in that chakra, because everything is a symbol. Similarly, if you go higher up in a dream, that's higher chakras. This could be a stairwell that goes up. This could be an elevator that takes you to higher floors. You may also have a dream that involves a multi-story building. In that case, it may be that the floor that you're on represents a certain chakra. If the ground floor of the building is the 1st chakra, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, you want to look at what level you're in the dream. That's critical. So the speed that you move through the landscape is related to the speed of your spiritual growth. This is the location part of height and location. The faster you move through the landscape, the faster you're growing. So there's various increments of the speed that you could move. When you're walking, you're moving at a relatively slow speed. If you start running, you're moving faster. If you're riding a bicycle, that indicates an even faster level of spiritual progress. If you're driving in a car, you're now moving at a significantly faster speed. If you're in a bus, the symbolism can include the fact that you're not only moving faster, but that a group of people can move with you at the same time. If you're in a train, you have an even longer amount of people who can all be connected together at the same time in a common vehicle. In an airplane, you now not only can move even faster than a bus or a train, but you move higher in the air, and a whole bunch of people can be on the airplane at the same time. So that's a wonderful sign. In fact, airplanes a lot of times do symbolize ascension. I've had many dreams that refer to airports or train stations or even bus stations, and this also seems to be an ascension metaphor of the fact that a lot of people will be able to make this spiritual shift in themselves and pop into a higher level of their own existence as they go through this transformation. A UFO would be even faster than an airplane, much faster, and potentially a lot of people could be on that too. So if you actually find yourself in a dream where you're on a UFO, that's an extremely, extremely positive sign, and it means that you're going through wonderful spiritual growth in your life. The faster you move through the dream landscape, the faster your spiritual progress is in your waking life. Flying. If you are actually out there by yourself, just flying through the air, that's a wonderful, wonderful sign of spiritual progress. And you can take that as a metaphor where, just like in synchronicity, if you see repeating numbers on a clock, look at whatever was happening in your life right before you had that symbol. So if you're flying in a dream, look at what was happening before you flew as a metaphor of what that dream is telling you. So if you just decide to get a new job, as I mentioned in my blog recently, sometimes that's what your higher self is waiting for. There's one little thing that you haven't been doing, and it's like you're resisting it, and you're resisting it, and you finally say, you know what, fine, let's just do it. And you know you're not going to like it, but you do it, and you take responsibility. Your higher self is very big on taking responsibility. I have so much more responsibility now than I ever imagined before. I've taken on so much, it's almost too much. But the idea is your higher self wants to make you excel, wants to bring out the genius that you have in you, because everybody has a genius within if they access it. We all have gifts that are totally unique for ourselves, and accessing your higher self will bring those out. And the faster that you move through the dream landscape, the more you're progressing towards your own genius. I want to also talk about the natural elements that you find in your dreams. First of all, water, very important. Water symbolizes the emotions. If you have a drinking glass with water in it, that symbolizes some kind of emotional energy that you're getting ready to take in. If you're actually drinking in a dream, it means you're taking in some sort of emotional energy. Rainfall typically symbolizes a difficult emotion that you're going through. A lake symbolizes a much larger body of emotion that you're facing at this time. And if you go into the lake, or you go through the lake, or you're rowing on the lake, or if you start drowning in the lake, all of these symbols directly relate to how you're responding with your emotional body. Ocean is an even more powerful symbol, and a tsunami, any type of apocalyptic dream, it doesn't mean the world is going to be destroyed. It means that your personal psyche is going through massive upheaval, major, major change. It's happening very quickly. The bathroom, if you're in a bathroom, or if you actually see bodily waste, whether it's fecal matter, whether it's urine or whatever, this invariably symbolizes unprocessed toxic emotions. I have many, many dreams that involve this. Everybody does. You'll have a dream where you got to go to the bathroom, but no matter where you go, you can't seem to make it. And you'll get these dreams too if you drink too much water and you do more than one sleep cycle. When you go back in and try to get another cycle, you have to pee in your physical body, and then in the dream you keep trying to urinate and you can't. Well, that actually does have a meaning. It doesn't just mean that your bladder is full. It means in the dream that you're actually looking to release some toxic emotion, but you can't, because eliminations refers to, in bodily terms, as symbolism of the body, eliminating these toxic emotions. Animals, another natural element in dreams, they represent the lower self. So you can look at the animal and figure out its characteristics, and that will give you more information. But regardless of the animal, in almost every case, unless it's some sort of mythological, marvelous fantasy being, it's always going to represent one of the lower chakras, yellow, orange, or red. Now, the colors don't always show up, but an animal is another way that you're going to get that symbolism. Earth and stone, minerals, that can also be that. elements like fire or air blowing really strongly, those elemental energies also correspond to the archetypes they represent. Fire can represent anger, air can represent the intellect, earth can represent getting grounded, and all of these things can appear in dreams, and you can read symbolism out of that stuff. Another natural element that will show up a lot is the characters, and particularly now I'm talking about police, medical professionals, authorities, and even people of other races. So if you're Caucasian, it could be black people or Asians, and you can mix and match as you choose, but the idea here is that all of these characters actually represent angelic beings or ETs. I see this a lot. Any type of being that wears a uniform, any type of being who's a teacher, any type of being who is an authority figure in any way, medical professional, whatever, will represent either your higher self or angelic beings that are helping you. And you can base that metaphor on what's going on. Now, I want to point out something personal here. A lot of people write in and say that they have dreams where I am featured. And they think that I'm actually going in there as a shaman and interacting with them in their dreams. This is not true. I do not have memories of being in people's dreams when I wake up. I have plenty of my own dreams. And people misconstrue that. Jung called this your transcendent aspect. For a lot of people, because of the material that I provide, they begin to project their transcendent aspect onto me. So if I show up in your dream or another character shows up, some people have a transcendent aspect on John Lennon. Some people might have it on Martin Luther King. Some people might have John F. Kennedy. Some people might have Jesus or Buddha. Take your pick. But these types of characters represent that part of you that is transcendent, that part of you, that part of your personality that is the higher self, or at least a hierarchy in that direction that knows more than you do, so you can analyze and interpret your dreams accordingly. You then want to also check the colors and the natural elements to derive further meaning about what these characters mean. You do want to analyze the characters. This is our next section. Each character represents a time coordinate. Now, what do I mean by that? What I'm saying is that when you have a person in your dream that you remember from life, that is showing you when the gravity well happened in your life that the dream is referring to. So you have a particular character, and maybe that was somebody you knew if you went to college, maybe that was somebody you knew in high school or somebody you knew in grade school. Regardless of when you knew that person, it is so important not to just say, oh, it was some person, some guy. It's very, very important to try to know who that person is, where did you see them, who do they look like. They may not look exactly like somebody you know, but they may be similar. The character is a time coordinate. Use the character, because what that means is the dream is referring to something that got blocked in time whenever that character was in your life, and an issue that happened when you knew them is now reiterating into your life in a current form. And again, in forgiveness lies the stoppage of the wheel of karma. So that person may represent some aspect you need to forgive. It's going to happen in the now. They are a projection of yourself. And again, the same issues will keep repeating with new people, so it happens over and over and over. And if you don't gain any new insight, then the same characters will keep showing up. You can recognize the origin of your problem, and then you collapse the fragment tree. These processes allow you to breach into the cosmos. You become like a planet, as you see in this art. You begin to see these dream messages as bridging you out into the cosmos. I've given you all the basics that you ever need to analyze every dream. The character events are events in your own life. It's all symbolism, it's all metaphor. You just look and you use your psychic awareness and you meditate on the symbolism, and you think about the fact that everything has a meaning. It's a story. It's telling you something in disguise. And the more you do this, you're accessing your higher self. You're bridging out. As you see here, this lovely art from Andrew Jones, it's like you're wearing the cloak. The root chakra, the red colors, all of that information coalescing, spiraling together, and that light from overhead, that beckoning that's bringing you to a higher consciousness, that pinprick hole through the darkness that you can walk through. It's bringing you into a higher awareness of who you are. And now in this third image, your chakras coming together. It can almost seem like you're building some new aspect of yourself. You're under construction. And in the ancient mystery school teachings, they called this the building of the light body. In the Hebrew tradition, they call it tikkun, the shattered vessels of light. We're healing the shattered vessels. In the traditions that became the Masonic order, that were originally Egyptian, they call it the rebuilding of the temple. The Masons call it rebuilding Solomon's temple. You are literally building yourself. You heal these issues, they don't keep happening in your life, you become happier, more fulfilled, and the next thing you know, these traumas stop happening. And now you're ready, once you've gone through enough of this, to get to the point where you can get verbal messages from your higher self. This is the Jedi Master Training. This is what everything has been leading up to, what we're about to do now. The beginning exercises start with conversation as meditation. I want you to practice this. I want you to try to speak in complete sentences with no verbal pauses. That means you don't say like, but, is that. I hear a lot of people using that one. You know, well, all these kinds of words that you say because you don't want to be interrupted. Maybe your ego is afraid of being shattered. You have a shame issue. You have a pride issue. If you don't have the ability to say a word that's not useful to the sentence, then just refrain from talking. And if you get interrupted, that's fine. But make sure that when you do speak, that the words that you say are very well structured. That's critical. 2 at once is another exercise. Try to listen to one conversation that other people are having while you're talking to someone else. If you do this too much, you're going to lose the thread of the conversation that you're having. But you want to be able to listen to that person who's talking to you, make verbal responses at certain times, but while they're talking, try to listen to something else. And ultimately, you don't want to ever not do this, which means you want to try to reduce distraction as much as possible. If you go out to eat, don't go to noisy, crowded restaurants that have TVs running. Go to a nice, quiet place. If there's calm music in the background, that's fine. But don't go to a place that has a loud TV or where you're crammed in next to everybody else. Try to make sure that your mind is always clear and balanced. But this 2 at once exercise is very important because what it's doing is it's training you to have that conversation, which is your conscious mind, while listening to something else. You give your conscious mind the job, which, as I said, is listen to your heartbeat, count your breaths, and hold on to those visual images that you're concentrating on. Give your conscious mind a job, and then you can let that go and listen around it and listen to another conversation. The Black Ops psychic training programs always look for people who are musicians, because if you're playing a guitar and singing, or if you're playing bongos and singing, or if you're playing the piano and singing, or playing drums and singing, you have to partition your mind into 2 components. And by doing that, you're learning how to run 2 things at once. One of the things you run is your conscious mind, the other is your intuition, which are levels of consciousness that you're going to be feeling at the same time. So you want to reduce distractions. That's, again, a beginning exercise. Don't listen to music or the television unless it takes your full attention. If you're going to drive with music on, you want to really listen to the music and make it part of the organic experience of driving. But don't let the music just be going in the background and tune it out. Similarly, if you're going to watch television, really engage. And if commercials come on, I recommend muting them. Don't let these sounds linger in the background, because what you want to do is get to the point where all the background noise in your environment is data. You don't screen anything out, because that's how you're going to be able to get these verbal messages. Then again, gradual awakening is another beginning exercise. Very important to spend at least 5 minutes motionless when you're waking up. Even if you're not trying to remember a dream, do this anyway if what you're trying to do is practice getting verbal messages from your higher self. Because in that state where you lay motionless as you're waking up, you actually go through several gradients of consciousness. And many people wake up to an alarm, and they bang the alarm, and then they get out of bed, and they go into the shower, and there's hot water, and all of a sudden you've ripped yourself out of the dream state, and you've ripped yourself through all these levels of consciousness before you ever got to experience them. So by waking up slowly, you get to experience the gradations, the intervals between dreaming and being awake, and you can learn to stop along the way and listen when you're in each of these states of consciousness. The meditative exercises I talked about before, this is critical. Light as a feather, stiff as a board, mind awake, body asleep, feeling your awareness concentrated into the center of your head. That's what they call the Kundalini meditation. And all the ancient teachings, again, is collapsing your chakras into a nest, going through the pineal gland. I talked about that before. Once you're in this state, every thought in your mind is data. There is no daydreaming. There is no imagination. Everything will just bubble up. You'll get visual images. You'll hear things that sound like they're off in the distance. It's all information. Audio recording is much easier than handwriting when you start to capture this data. And this was confirmed to me by a very high-ranking Black Ops guy who worked in these types of programs where they designed technologies to help remote viewers along. This is not the remote viewing you read about in the books. There was a whole other program that has always been classified that was much deeper that I've now heard about. And this man told me, trying to get something where your body moves is very, very difficult. It's much easier to make your body speak because you can be really out of an, just kind of talking a murmur like this. That's a lot easier than trying to make your hand move or trying to type or anything like that. It's much, much harder to get good data if you're trying to type it in. The next meditative exercise I want to talk about in this section is called climbing the ladder. And what I mean by that is that you will be able to develop the ability to go up and down between lighter states of trance and deeper states of trance. And I want you to practice this. I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's done in just a minute with the deep sea fishing exercise. The idea here is that you anchor your conscious thoughts to your index finger. This is a technique that comes from hypnosis. So that means that you want to feel yourself breathing in, and as you take a nice deep breath, you want to crank that finger up. Now, every other part of your body should already be feeling light as a feather, stiff as a board by this point, but you crank that finger up, and you want to really almost feel as if you're like lifting a heavy weight, and you're just, cranking it up, and it almost is like too much. And you're inhaling, and then finally, you exhale and you drop your finger. And as you do, I want you to feel as if you're plunging down through space, and you can even feel that it's like you're plunging into water, and you feel the water is almost like this energetic presence. There's this deep sea of energy around you, and that's a very, very critical shift that happens in how you feel. And you can keep doing this. You can anchor it to your finger, and each finger drop will bring you deeper and deeper into a state of relaxation. This works very well because it has a bodily feeling, it has a visual that you can focus on of dropping down and seeing being underwater, and it has the actual finger that can form a trigger. So after a while, you can use your finger, and just by raising and lowering your finger and making it like it's very difficult to move and then letting it just drop, you actually have a pretty amazing way to quickly get deeper and deeper into trance states where you'll be able to access your higher self. Again, I want to talk about remote viewing protocols because this is where the rubber really meets the road on this stuff. Do not analyze or attempt to understand your data. You're going to be bringing in data, and I'm going to talk to you about the different ways to do that in a minute. But before we even start to talk about that, the most important thing is do not analyze your data. Don't understand your data. If you do understand your data, you're not doing it correctly. So it's a very difficult thing because what's going to happen is you're going to have to allow words to pass through you, but you're focused more on the process of listening to them and recording them as accurately as possible. And as soon as you hear yourself starting to understand the words, you got to do your deep sea fishing with your finger and drop back down the ladder, go deeper and deeper in to your subconscious until again you can't hear the words. But you're only listening to the sounds and you're conveying them as words, but you're not trying to understand their meaning. And time will become longer and longer between the time the words are spoken so that you don't have the time to remember what they're saying. That's another part of this exercise. You don't want to have emotional reactions to your data. That's the next part of the remote viewing protocol. You don't want to be sad, you don't want to be angry, you don't want to have like, ooh, wow, what was that? Again, it's another kind of parallel to not analyzing your data. You do, however, want to have a state of uplifting gratitude, and we're going to get into that in a minute. You also want to ensure that your body is comfortable. You should not be thirsty, you should not be hungry, and you should not need to go to the bathroom. Before you try to do this exercise, which involves inducing the light as a feather, stiff as a board, all things I said about raising and lowering your arms and legs, and then using the finger technique, deep sea fishing, you go deeper and deeper and deeper. You want to feel really, really out there, like you just are almost falling asleep. It's very difficult to stay awake. Make sure that your body has all these needs taken care of. Go do that first and then come back before you do the exercise. You want to keep a brisk pace. Whatever it is that's happening, just keep doing something. The only time that you don't want to keep a brisk pace is if you notice that you're starting to analyze too much, or that your mind is getting too active, or that you're starting to understand what you're saying. That's when you want to stop and you want to just go deeper. But again, you want to get stuff that sounds crazy. You're actually letting your conscious mind say whatever it wants, and you're documenting everything. Remember, the protocol is that whatever comes into your mind is data. So you just can say whatever it is that you're thinking, whatever it is that you're feeling. You can say, I'm having a personal note here. I'm thinking about what I have to do for work tomorrow. And you can just toss that in. Now your conscious mind has been heard. It gets to say what it wants to say, and you can go on listening to whatever else comes in. I also want to talk about shielding protocols, which is not something you get from remote viewing, where they could be open to all kinds of influences. The most important thing is that your mental state needs to be in a state that we would call uplifting gratitude. And what that does is it forms a shield of white light protection around you. Your attitude is the gateway. If you don't have that positive attitude, you're not going to be getting good information. You should never attempt to do this practice if you are angry, sad, frustrated, or stressed out. You will get bad information, and you might even get negative beings that are using you to speak through. Unfortunately, there are many examples of people who are channeling, and because they analyze their data, because they understand the information as it comes in, you think that you're writing it. You think that you know what's going on. You think you know which direction it's going. I can't tell you how many times I've done this practice over the years, and my mind starts to engage, and I have actually been chastised by words that come in later, and I'm specifically told, stop trying to analyze the data. Just get your mind out of the way. It's an exercise in humility because you really can't think that you're in charge. You can't write it. You can't think about which way it's going. There are techniques that you can use, which I call thought balls, which some readers like to use this, in which you get a ball of information and you get it all at once, and then you can explain it in your own words. And that is an easier way to do this. You go deep into trance, you get a sudden thought form that would take a lot of words to explain, and then you use your own words with your own free will, and you do understand it, and you do know what you're saying. But again, a thought ball means that you only get really deep long enough to go down the ladder, you get a burst of information, you grab it, you go back up the ladder, and now from a more conscious state, you extemporize on what you heard. You can do great work with this in terms of working with somebody as a client. A lot of mileage has been gotten off of this. You can do it in context of a palm reading. You can do it in context of being an astrology expert. When you do tarot card readings or any other type of divination, you can actually consult the card and have that pop, have that thought ball come in. And the interesting thing about thought balls is that as you explain it to somebody in your own words, they have an emotional reaction. That emotional reaction triggers the next thought ball because they're actually freeing up blocked energy in those gravity wells I was talking about in their subconscious mind. As the gravity well bursts, you get another shot of data, another visual image comes in, and the person gets more and more emotional. They might start crying. And I have done this many, many times. Lots of people can do it because what happens is you start downloading that person's entire life story. They're amazed. They say, oh my God, you're such an incredible psychic. But yet everything I'm describing is like the generic, the entry level technique. Because again, you're only getting a brief burst of psychic information. If that's all you can do, because remember, when you collapse your chakras together, you have a nested set of spheres. The surfaces of the spheres are moving all around when your conscious mind is engaged. And there's all this stuff that you have to move through to get through each layer of the spheres to the center. But when you meditate, when you count your heartbeats, count your breathing, you slow all that stuff down, the spheres actually stop moving, and now you can get to the center. Another exercise along these lines that I don't have in the slides is you can visualize different rings rotating, and there's a little hole in each ring, but the rings are not lining up, and then eventually what you want to do is get them to line up. And as they line up like this, what's happening is that you can visualize them turning at different rates, and you want to keep a steady rotation, but one might be going faster, and you want to just correct everything until they all rotate at the same speed. You line up all the cracks, similar to a bicycle combination lock. And at that point, this arc of energy bolts through, and that's when the psychic information comes in. So you can practice that. You can actually use that as a visual exercise of these rotating rings on top of each other. I was doing that when I was like 7 years old, 8 years old, from reading this book, How to Make ESP Work For You. It was an exercise I came up with. It worked very well for me. So the state of uplifting gratitude is very important for the shielding protocol. You should never attempt to gain this access if you're angry, sad, frustrated, or stressed out. The next thing that we have is if you think you're getting bad information, do not panic. If you start understanding your data, if something comes through that you say, well, that doesn't sound right, Don't freak out. If you freak out, if you get worried, then you need to stop. And you need to wait until another time comes where you can do it again. Because if you start having any panic reaction, any data that you're going to have is not going to be good. So remember, I'm giving you permission to get bad data. I'm giving you permission to have a negative entity whispering in your ear, because sometimes it's going to happen. You're not going to be perfect. A lot of people out there advertise themselves as channelers, but they're getting little thought balls and then they're adding too much of their own stuff in. I want you to go past the level of thought balls where you can slow down those spheres enough that you can keep it steady. And remember, the more you can steadily hold a visual image in your mind, the more you're able to actually hold those spheres in place, and you're going to be able to get a consistent feed of information rather than just little bursts where you have to go down, grab something, come back up. You want to stay in the consistency, and that's a deeper level of this practice. So don't panic if you think you're getting bad information. I want you to stop, I want you to breathe, and I want you to go deeper into trance using the deep sea fishing protocol. Stop talking, don't do anything more. Take deep breaths, and each time you inhale, raise your finger up and make it, oh, so you're so tired, and oh, boom, let it go down. Feel yourself dropping, feel yourself whoosh, and that you go into that water and see the deep blue color, because the deep blue is the third eye. So you want to visualize deep blue as you're doing this. That's why I say feel like you're going under the water. Do that several times until you feel that your body is stiff again, until you feel that you're deeper down. You go down the ladder, and then the thoughts that start to float into your mind when you're in this uplifting gratitude and you're not analyzing anything, you'll be back online. I've had to do this many times. If my mind starts engaging, I step back, I deep sea fish a bunch of times, get back in there, and then I continue. There's many pauses in my readings. If you read them on the website, they don't all come out in one big stream. You have to stop and then keep going. So now I want to talk about the two different levels of verbal streams that you're going to get. And they represent increasingly difficult intervals. The first level, now this is after the thought balls. The thought balls are just little tiny snapshots, but they have visual images and they have emotional data in them, and they'll come poof really fast, and then you can unravel them in your own words, and that's what most readers do. And you can be really, really crackerjack psychic that way. I've done a lot of readings that way. But when you really go deep sea fishing and you're lying down and you're doing this technique and you have some sort of recorder, I recommend now using the digital recorder that has an MP3 file that it makes for you, which you can then plug it into your computer by USB port and download that MP3 in. And then when you're transcribing it, what you want to do is get your MP3 player where you can hit the space bar and then it starts and stops the recording. So there's a keyboard command. It's basically the same in either Windows or Mac. It's Alt-Tab. The Alt key in Windows is what you do. If you have a Mac, you have to use Command-Tab. But what that does is it's a keystroke that pops you between different programs that you have running. So what you want to do is be in a word processor and then transcribe as much as you can off your MP3 file until you run out of words or you hear just enough that you know you're going to run out of time to transcribe it. Then hit Alt-Tab or Command-Tab and then hit the space bar. And then Command-Tab or Alt-Tab back over to your word processor. Finish typing what you know. Alt-Tab back again when you're done. Hit the space bar again. The words start again. Alt-Tab back and keep transcribing. Sounds a little complicated, but by using these key shortcuts, you can actually transcribe pretty quickly, whatever your comfortable rate is. And if you're doing this technique, the words are going to come through slow, so you probably won't need to stop very much. But that way, you have an MP3 recording of yourself saved on your computer, and you have a transcript because you're going to want to get all this data. It's really not a good idea to try to write it down by hand. You can do that, but you're basically going to need to dip down, grab something, write it down, and when you write it down, you got to come out. So you go up the ladder, then you got to go down again, up again, down again. I did that for about the first 3 weeks of this, and I graduated very quickly to audio, which is more work because you got to transcribe it, but ultimately it's better. So the first level of verbal streams that will come through in your psychic information, once you've gone past thought balls, is sentence fragments. And in this form, you hear a partial sentence in one big piece. You go deep, 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 deep down. You hear all these murmuring voices, and it'll sound just like your imagination. You've been conditioned to think it's just your imagination. But you pick up one voice, and there's probably going to be several of them, and they might even have like positions. Like one will seem to be over here, and you hear it from there. One will seem to be over here. This will make a lot more sense once you get used to going deep into trance. but you find a location and then you want to tune into it. You want to project your energy in that direction. Feel yourself going to where the voice is and listen as hard as you can and try to listen to what it says. And you might not get everything. It's going to fade in and out. It's going to seem like it's in the background. Because remember, the foreground is you're keeping your conscious mind busy. You're doing something. You're doing your heartbeat. You're doing your breathing, maybe a visualization exercise. You listen around that and you go in there and you find one of these voices. That's why the 2 for 1 exercise, 2 is 1, have one conversation, listen to another at the same time. The more you practice that, the easier it's going to be to do this. You're focused on your conscious mind, you're trying to still your mind as much as you can, and you listen to what's going on in the background. Then you hear like a fragment of a sentence, just enough. You remember as much as you can, you hold it all at once, and then in this case, because you're not as advanced yet, you do need to climb back up the ladder to activate your voice enough that you can speak it out onto your recording. If you don't actually climb up the ladder, you're going to be too tranced out, and you're not going to be able to speak at all. So you do have to go up the ladder, but now instead of a tiny little thought ball, you have a sentence fragment. That's the first stage. And in my readings, if you read them online, I call that level 2. The next stage is 1 to 3 words at a time. In this case, you're now at a deeper level of trance. You've developed your meditative practice more. You've been really working on this. You've been working hard. Congratulations. What's going to start happening now is that you can maintain a steady, secure channel. You can stay in that deep, deep state, and now you've activated your voice enough that you can get your voice working while the data is streaming in real time. Even at this point, when you're doing this, the words are going to come through very slowly. If you actually listen to the original audio of the Law of One series, it sounds like this. Each new piece of information will come through at a remarkably slow speed. That's kind of how it's going to sound. You might get one word or you might get a group of 3 words. In fact, I get this rhythm where I'll have 3 words. Dum, dum, dum. And then there's a pause. Dum, dum, dum. Another pause. On and on and on like that. It's really slow. The idea is that by going that slow, you're meditating at such a deep level that you cannot track even one sentence. And you really have to wrestle with the ego here because there's a part of you that wants to look good, that wants to, sound right, and you want to analyze the data, and you got to let go of all that. You got to be willing to be spontaneous, to not care about what comes out. You don't even want to be interested in the information. You're just doing the exercise. Don't get attached. Don't have an emotional reaction. Just do the protocol. Speak the words as they come in. Just listen carefully and let it flow, 1 word at a time. Now, I don't have it in the slides because it's very advanced, but eventually you can go to what I call level 5, because in the Seth books they talk about level 1, which is a very surface trance. Level 2 in the Seth books, like in Seth Speaks, corresponds to what I call sentence fragments. Level 3, as Seth talks about, is where you can actually zoom into someone's body and analyze it medically. I don't really teach that. I haven't practiced that myself, so I don't really know that much about it. Level 4 is 1 to 3 words at a time. Level 5 is where you go so deep that you're now actually able to do a continuous flow, but you're still not tracking the words. You're just speaking, and the words just tumble out, and you just keep on going, but you're not attached to what you're saying. You just go and go and go and go. And this is the level that I've now gotten to. It took a long time for me to develop this. I do not recommend practicing this technique or trying to practice this technique until you're really advanced and until you have definitely mastered the 1 sentence at a time, or the level 2 as it's called in the Seth books, and the level 4, or the 1 to 3 words at a time, which are increasingly difficult practices to do. By the time you get to level 5, you can actually just stream it out. You can even get to the point that it's really fast. And that's what I've been able to do now. I get to a level of trance where I get my mind out of the way completely and it just tumbles out. But again, it's a very advanced practice. Now again, the principle of no tracking. If you understand or can follow your sentences, you're not going deep enough. It is so important. I can't keep stressing this enough. And if you're already doing psychic readings, if you've already put them out and you have been tracking them, you still have a chance to improve. This is not something where you have to be perfect from day one. It's something where you can practice exercises, train yourself, and you can become better and better and better at this. And I would love to see people who are already doing this work now practice these exercises, because this is the Jedi training. This is what's going to make you able to get stuff like I got, because by practicing these exercises, even though they're relatively simple, you're going to start getting sentences that will predict the future with remarkable accuracy. Many times the tapes that I'm transcribing would tell me what was going on right before I sat down to transcribe them, and yet they might be a month old. Sometimes I got backlogged after a while. In this case, it's going to be MP3 files. I really don't recommend using cassette tapes, but there's lots of little MP3 recorders you can get that are excellent. You hold it on your chest. There's a little light that lets you know that it's on. Make sure you change batteries regularly, or you can use plug-in power to be safer. But you can just change batteries once a week or once every 2 weeks, whatever you think is safe, and then just download them into your computer and transcribe them. And again, the transcription is important. We'll get into that in a minute. The last part of this section here is embrace nonsense. Whatever comes through is your data. Weird is good. So that means just take anything. If it's a strange sentence, if it sounds totally schizophrenic, that's better. If you're doing these practices, especially sentence fragments, and you're only getting stuff that sounds perfect, I can guarantee you're doing it wrong. If you're going to do it correctly, I want to hear schizophrenic stuff coming out. I want to hear stuff that doesn't seem to make any sense, that's very cryptic, that's very weird, because that's the language of the subconscious. That's the symbolism and the metaphor. The symbolism will be coming through in your language, and you'll have to analyze the reading as if you're analyzing spoken language. And that is so critical. Now, while you're doing the reading, and while you're either doing sentence fragment exercise or the 1 to 3 word at a time exercise, you're going to get visual snapshots. Images may appear very quickly, but they can be quite complex. You want to describe any of these visual images you see in detail. So while you're recording yourself, you say, I'm getting an image of da-da-da, and then you describe what the image is. And it could be complex. You could be seeing a character, and then something falls, and he goes over and he grabs it, and it's a package, and he opens up the package, and something pops out. And that could all happen very quickly. Boom, you see the thing fall, and he goes over and he opens it up, but then you see, okay, well, that was an image. And sometimes when you're speaking the words, you're going to be having these images going at the same time. So you don't analyze it, you don't interpret it, you just say out loud, I'm getting an image and I'm seeing da-da-da-da-da. Describe the image and keep on going. You want to pay attention to the colors, whether it's indoors or outdoors. That's very important, because indoors really represents more of your personal interior space, your own emotional body. Outdoors represents how you're getting out there into the world and how you're interacting with others. That's another metaphorical thing you can use in dreams as well. And you want to pay attention to any action that takes place. If you say, I'm seeing a man, usually the man is not just standing there. Usually he's doing something. So you want to describe what it is that he's doing. Do not attempt to connect your visual images to the audio stream. Do not analyze anything. Just say, I'm getting an image of so-and-so, but don't try to correlate it with what you're saying. Just say that you're getting an image. Now, what you might find is that once you commit the image to words, your reading, the words that you speak, will actually refer to the visual image, because that's a way in which you're trying to get information. And once you commit to the image, you go deep sea fishing, go deep down, raise and lower your finger, plunge into the ocean, go in there, and then from that state, your words may very well start to respond to the visual image that you got. But that's not your job to analyze. You let it happen on your own. Don't do anything to analyze it. And if you start analyzing it, you got to go deeper. You got to stop and go deeper. Another thing that might happen to you is you might see a book, and you might be able to read pages from the book. This may arrive as a visual image, something that's right in front of you. The book may seem old. It may have a lot of interesting things. And there will be words written in the book. Sometimes the words are already there, and you can literally actually focus your eyes and read the words. You might actually be able to do this for an extended period of time if you're more of a visual psychic. I've had entire readings come through that I literally just read right out of a book. You want to just read naturally. Don't stop and think about what you're reading. Just dictate the words. And again, if you're dictating the words and you start trying to understand it rather than just read it and report it, you're too high up in your level of consciousness. You got to go deeper down. All you want to do is read and report but it's just like transcribing something where you're not even paying attention to what it says. And again, in the transcription process, you don't want to analyze either. You want to train yourself that when your voice is talking in trance, that you're not listening to it, you're not analyzing it. So you can practice doing this exercise by transcribing. Transcribe your voice, type what you're saying, but don't listen to yourself and don't try to analyze it or understand it. You can stop the tape, go back and read it, but don't try to understand it while it's happening, or you're actually screwing up. While you're looking at a book, you may also see an empty page, and the words may materialize as you go. This is something else that's happened to me a lot. It depends on what's going to happen. This usually happens in deeper trance states. And again, you can try to visualize a book and try to see if there's any words there, but oftentimes it's going to be quite spontaneous. You go deep into trance, and you're not trying to see a book, you just see a book, and there it is, and you got to open it up and start reading. You also will find sometimes in the reading that you'll hear music. You want to document the music, and we're going to get to that in a minute in dealing with post-reading analysis, because music a lot of times will happen when you're coming out of a reading and then you're typing it later on. So again, in post-reading analysis, I highly recommend transcribing your own readings. Even if you don't type very fast, it's critical that you do this yourself. Don't put it on somebody else, because a lot of psychic things will happen while you're transcribing. And you want to tune out and not be tracking the data while you're transcribing it. Any additional thoughts that you have while you're transcribing are part of the data, and you want to write them down. Make brackets, and then put your first initial in a colon, and then type whatever it is that's coming into your mind, because that's data. Then you can go back later on, and if you're reading it and you hear something at that time, put brackets in again, and then put the date and a colon first, so you know what date you put the words in. And then that way, if you hear something, or if words pop into your mind while you're reading, which you'll discover is going to start to happen, then you can document all that stuff, but you put it in brackets. You want to analyze your sentences, each sentence that you get, as if it was a dream. Again, if you're doing this process correctly, you're going to get cryptic, weird sentences. You use all the logic of what I was telling you before to break them down. Everything in the sentence is you, and there's a lot of weird things that can happen, because in my case, as a male, my higher self refers to me sometimes as a feminine gender. In fact, in the early days, I had a lot of references to Christina, which is sort of like the Christ consciousness. Well, Christina was me. Because again, you can be both genders. So if you're female, you may get it referring to you as a male. If you're male, you may get a female. And that's one of the ways that your higher self will kind of work around your conscious mind and sneak something in so that you don't know what's being said. You can't track it. And it uses a lot of clever things like this. It'll use symbolism and metaphor to encode it so that your mind can't analyze it while you're hearing it. Now again, as you go deeper and your higher self can trust you not to interfere, it's not going to need to do as much metaphorical encoding. But if you look at my readings, a lot of times what happens is I start at the level 2 point where I'm getting sentence fragments. The sentence fragments, typically when you hear one of those, they're very cryptic. They're very strange. Then as you go to the 1 to 3 words at a time exercise, once you really get practiced with this and you start doing it well, you're going to be able to get more consistent sentences that are going to sound better. But still, you're going to get some really strange stuff in there. And again, if it doesn't sound strange, you're not doing this process well. It's only after a lot of practice and very intense work that you're going to be able to do this. And again, the dream work, analyzing and remembering your dreams, all that stuff is a precursor, because to be able to remember a dream is to go into the same state of consciousness where you can hear the words. You will hear words while you're trying to remember a dream, and sometimes I've had a lot of trouble because I'm trying to write a dream down while the words are coming in. My higher self has told me that it's much more important, if you're hearing the words, to nail the words down than it is to try to remember the details of the dream. A lot of times the dream will set up what the words are going to talk about in the reading, but the reading is much more specific than the dream. So if you have to choose between you're trying to remember a dream and then you start hearing words, go with the words. But you can also dictate your dream into the tape recorder. Now this is where it gets tricky, because the best way to write dreams down, if you do it every morning, is to go to your computer and type them in. But if you start getting readings every morning while you wake up, you may want to transcribe everything. But if you start getting backlogged, you don't want to lose track of your dreams. You want to keep them coming in. So ideally what you want to do is not try to do this reading exercise every day. Do it when you have time. Do it on the weekend. Try to write your dreams down every day. Try to get something, because the more you practice this, the better you'll be able to do readings. But then when you have more time, really just don't worry about the dream. Wake up, get your tape recorder, or your MP3 recorder, put it on your chest, and start dictating whatever comes in. So your higher self may refer to you in the feminine gender if you're male, or male if you're female. All these kind of things can happen. It's going to try to trick you and get around your conscious mind. Cryptic passages that you speak may make sense later on. So now you've got the training. And this Andrew Jones art actually is my face. He based it off of my face. The eyes don't really look like my eyes, but this is the cover of our album, Wanderer Awakening. You may start to discover that actually your soul did not come from here. There's many, many people whose souls are angelic or extraterrestrial in nature, and what they've done is they've come to this planet to help out the Earth. And those are called wanderers. There's estimated to be at least 120 million of them on the planet at this time. And if you are a wanderer, you're going to have a much easier time accessing your higher self. And again, in this next piece of art, we have all these different levels of consciousness. Remember, we're tethered into bacteria, we're tethered into plants, we're tethered into fish, insects, birds, animals. All of these influences are part of our mind. I showed you the proof in part 1, and now I'm telling you that there's cosmic beings out there, and you can let them be part of your mind too. They already are in one sense. Your conscious mind is a menagerie of influences. But the more you do these exercises, the more you can actually gain access to your higher self, and you may not even need to be lying down. You can ultimately train yourself by using the finger drop, and even that ultimately is not necessary, to tune in deeper and deeper. I also found for my practice that holding on to at least one quartz crystal, and even holding it right against the back of my head, the occipital lobe, in the beginning that was very important. I was told it was critical in being able to get me to do readings better. So that's another exercise I recommend. After a while, you can graduate from crystals. You won't need them, but in the early days, they can make a big difference. I want to say a little bit about lucid dreaming, but that's not really what this video is about. We might do another one, and out-of-body experiences. Lucid dreaming, when you wake up in the morning, repeat in your mind, next time I'm dreaming, I want to remember to recognize that I'm dreaming. That's the critical key. At the same time, play over the dream in your mind, except imagine yourself noticing something is wrong and then saying, oh my God, I'm dreaming. You keep practicing this exercise, repeat in your mind the phrase, next time I'm dreaming, I want to remember to recognize that I'm dreaming, as you're falling back asleep. In the next dream, you may still be repeating that mantra, and all of a sudden you're in a dream, and now you notice, oh my God, I'm in a dream. At that point, it's very important to stay calm. One of the things that William Bowman recommends is you use the phrase clarity now, and you say clarity now and put your hands out, like you're trying to stunt your environment and stop it from moving. Out-of-body experiences are much more difficult than lucid dreams. There, you do the same meditative protocols. You have to go through the level that you could get a very deep reading. Keep going deeper, let yourself get really, really stiff, and then I want you to visualize yourself standing in the other side of the room and looking at yourself in bed. From that perspective, if you can do that strong enough, you will actually transfer into your body and go out of body. I've had a lot of success with lucid dreams. I have had success with OBEs. Once you're in them, the most important part is to stay in. If things start to turn gray, that means you're phasing out. Then what you want to do is focus on some area in the center of your vision and make it as clear as you can, and then widen the aperture. That's very important, and you do that while you're saying clarity now. Another exercise is called spinning. It sounds crazy, but put your hands together like this, put your thumbs together, hold it over your head, tilt your head up, and then spin in circles. And what will happen is if it starts going gray and you do that, when you come out of it, you're going to be in a new environment, but you're still in the lucid dream. These exercises are wonderful. Look at this beautiful sunset here. This is some of the images I want to leave you with. Andrew Jones' art is really amazing. You can learn to access this landscape of the dreams, get to deeper and deeper levels of who you are, and you can make this bridge to infinity as you see in this image from John Seymour. I'm David Wilcock. I'm hoping that you can eventually attain personality transparency. That's what I'm going to end on here. Ultimately, you become the embodiment of your higher self when you speak, use conversations, meditation. It is your higher self. You're no longer having to access your higher self because you have become an embodiment of your higher self. So I'll leave you with this last beautiful vision of the ocean and finally of the galaxy itself. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. God bless you.